Hello, I'm Steve Cohen, and this is Congressional Report. Congressional Report, this session is a Congressional Report. And the Congressional Reporter is Memphis's own premier reporter, Kontji Anthony. Kontji, thank you for being the host and for giving the public an opportunity to get a real Congressional Report.
I'm just thankful that Channel 5 would lend me out to do the honors. Let's just get right to it. Before we start with questions, I think this would be a good time to just talk about how Congress works. What do you do in Congress, and how does it impact us here in the Mid-South? Well,
it's an interesting thing. Congress is a group of 435 men and women elected by equal districts within a margin of error of about 1% from throughout the country. We go and we vote on bills, but that's just a part of it. Part of it's voting. Part of it is trying to get amendments into bills to affect policy either on a national basis or in your own local markets. There are what are called earmarks, where you get funding for projects in your own community, federal projects, but there are amendments that change policy and change budget priorities. There is legislation you can sponsor on your own and pass, much more difficult to do in Congress than in a state legislature because most legislation is the chairman's legislation. You do constituent services and help people, as we do in our Memphis office, with Social Security issues, with veterans issues, with passports, with visa issues, immigration issues, all kind of different federal involvements. Could be tax issues. But there are a lot of areas you work with there. And then there are besides, you specialize and work in your committees. Mine are judiciary, an area I've loved, served 22 years in the state senate on judiciary.
You're a chair, right?
I've become, in my second term, thankfully, a chairman. I'm chairman of the Commercial and Administrative Law Subcommittee, which has dealt with bankruptcies, bankruptcy legislation.
That's huge here. I mean,
Memphis is one of the bankruptcy capitals of the country,
right,
and so is Tennessee. So it's a big issue here. We've had hearings on the automobile companies, General Motors and Chrysler bankruptcies. We've had hearings on medical bankruptcies, which is one of the primary causes, medical costs of people going into debt. We've had hearings on the reasons why people have gotten, and this country's gotten into such a financial mess, with issues that relate to bankruptcy and how people get into bankruptcy, jurisdiction issues with the bankruptcy courts. We've got a bankruptcy bill coming out that'll deal with venue at Mississippi vis-a-vis Tennessee, and when people can file in this Tennessee jurisdiction as a forum more convenient for them than in Mississippi if the creditors happen to be here and it's more convenient for the debtor to come up here and file, try to allow that to happen. Some changes in the bankruptcy law, which is called BABCISA, the bankruptcy bill of 2000, I think it was 2005, that was very much pro-creditor and anti-debtor, and one that I would like to see changed in a great number of ways. So we've got amendments to that bill. And there are other areas we get into in commercial administrative law as well. We're going to have hearings on OxyContin drug and effects of it. We've got some hearings on malt beverages because it's commercial law.
What about malt beverages?
Well, how malt beverages are regulated and distributed throughout the country. So commercial law is pretty amorphous in the areas you can go into. Chairman Conyers, who appointed me to be the chairman of this committee, gives me a leeway on jurisdiction and opportunity to go into issues that are a little different. We've got voice over internet protocols on telecommunications and wireless communications, which is commercial law. We have all the administrative law concerning the federal rules and procedures, federal records, federal departments, and how they deal with regulations. So the head of what's his name, Cass Sunstein, who's the new head of a department in the Obama administration, came over and visited me and to talk about how the regulatory reviews go. So there's areas there, and then you work on the floor. There's so many other areas of legislation you work on.
Well, I've got to, there's so many things I want to talk to you about, okay? So hopefully we can get them all in this hour. Now, okay, first of all, I think the hot topic right now is health care reform. Why did you vote in favor of that? And can you speak to some of the myths, some of the, the truths, the earmarks? Can we talk about that?
Monumental bill, major night. It was let's see, 7 from 11 is 4, 5, 6, 7. November the 7th, Saturday night, we voted about 10 o'clock in the evening Eastern time. And after 97 years of discussion in the American arena, started by Teddy Roosevelt, running for president in 1912 on the Bull Moose Party platform, a bill was finally passed in the United States Congress to provide for some form of universal health care. I think it's at least, maybe it's 97 years late, but at least it's, say, 50 or 60 years late. Harry Truman really took up the call and introduced legislation and tried to get it moving when he became president. Sat fallow during the Eisenhower years. President Johnson got Medicaid and Medicare passed in 1965. That was a major advance, most major advance probably in America and since Social Security in terms of helping people with government assistance. This passage of this bill, assuming it becomes law, will be the biggest change since 1965, and maybe the biggest.
What would happen? I mean, everybody seems to, you just hear so many different things, and I mean, how do you weed through all that and just tell us, ABC, this is what it does? Well,
it does a lot of things. What it does is it gives most people, provides a system where they can get health care and will get health care, mostly by using the private insurance market, which we have now, with subsidies for individuals at certain income levels. Family of 4, it's about $90,000 and below. They will get subsidies based on their income level to pay for their insurance from the government, and then small businesses of $500,000 and less will get subsidies as well to help them with providing insurance for their employees. Everybody's going to be required in some way or another to have insurance. Middle-class people will benefit, and people in lower economic levels, because they'll get subsidies to take care of what they're paying for now. And hopefully we'll control costs and control the effects that the health care rising costs, which is double. The increase in health care in the last 10 years has been double the increase in wages. So it's eaten into a great deal more of the federal government's budget. We provide already, the federal government provides Medicaid, Medicare, TRICARE, Veterans Care, and those are major government programs. So we already have a lot of government health care. This will, through the private market, make sure that individuals get insurance to complement
the uninsured. You know, some people can't seem to get insurance. Is that what you're saying?
Well, part of it, some people can't, but it's not just the people who can't get it and them getting insurance, but it's guaranteeing the people who have insurance, it doesn't cost them too much, because there'll be subsidies for them, and there will also be a public option, at least in the House bill, that will be a program that will offer insurance at negotiated rates that won't have the expenses of the executive involved. The average executive in an insurance company, the top executive, is $10 million a year salary, and you've got other executives stacked up underneath that person, him or her, making millions of dollars. That type of salary level will not be in the public plan. Advertising won't be there, and profits won't be there for stockholders. So the public option should cost less, and by being available in an exchange which would be created in each state where insurances are available, the public option, which should cost less but offer the same benefits, should keep the cost of the private insurance from going up, because you've got a public option as an alternative to keep costs from going up. One of the big things we're doing is to say pre-existing conditions, whether private insurance or not, can no longer be a condition not to write you insurance. And you won't be discriminated against if you have a pre-existing condition, whether it be diabetes, heart disease, cancer, Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis, whatever it is. Also, there can't be a limit on your lifetime benefits that are paid out, which a lot of policies have. You will not be able to be charged a deductible for wellness and prevention programs that are so important to checking the growth of health care costs, because if you have wellness and prevention programs, you're less likely to get sick or sicker later on if you haven't had vaccinations and checkups, colonoscopies, mammograms, and whatever.
What about the earmarks?
There aren't earmarks in the bill. In fact, I tried to get something.
Everybody talks about that.
There are not earmarks in this bill at all. There are not earmarks. Earmarks are special financial set-asides by congressmen for their districts. I tried to get one for the Med. I worked very hard to get something that would be similar to an earmark, but it wouldn't say for the Med. It would have said something like for a regional hospital with a trauma center, level 1, that borders 2 states, that serves X amount of whatever. And it would have been the Med, and but it wouldn't have said the Med. And we tried to get something there. And we're continuing to try. And if I can get it in the conference committee, or if not there, in the appropriations bill later on with an amendment, I'm going to get it. So I'm working on that. But there were not any earmarks.
Where does this stand? Where does the legislation stand?
Well, the legislation's passed the House. It needs 218 votes to pass. We had 220. All but one were Democrats, one Republican. Representative Gow of Louisiana voted as the 219th vote. Once it had already passed with 218 votes, he voted for it, which I think was not a vote of courage or conscience. It was a political vote to protect his behind. If he really cared about that bill, he'd have voted for it immediately, or voted for it before the Democrats put up 218 votes to see that it passed. He was probably told by his leadership, you wait and let as many Democrats as possible vote. If they don't have the votes, you don't vote for it and it dies. If they have the votes, then you'll let many vote for it as possible, and if it hurts them in their districts, those 217 or 218th Democrat will have an opportunity to go after them if they be vulnerable, if we think this is a place where they could be vulnerable, and you're free, and in your district, New Orleans, where they need health care in a way just as similar as Memphis, because a lot of lower economic income people who need health care, and where health care is not being delivered appropriately, you can vote for it and say that you supported it, and you supported the president.
Are you calling him out?
I'm calling him out.
You just called him out.
I'm calling him out. I thought his vote was cowardly, and I think some people gave him some kudos, which he did not deserve.
Tell me about the med. You mentioned the med. We've been hearing that the ER there's threat that the emergency room could close down. You're one of the founders of it.
I'm proud of the med. It was county commissioner in 1979. We voted for it. It was
founder, but more like the legislation.
Yeah, right. I'm a founder. I'm a father.
Okay.
And Minerva Johnnigan was a mother, and Jesse Turner, Vasco Smith, Walter Bailey, Charlie Perkins, and I were fathers. I take great pride in the med and work constantly to try to find funding for it. We tried to get the med will help from this bill because it'll be less uninsured. With less uninsured, then they'll get compensated from the insurance that these people have when they come to see the med. And if they have insurance, they won't come to the med emergency room, which is the most expensive way to give treatment, which we do now for people who are uninsured, and it costs our Shelby County taxpayers money on their property tax bill because the primary funder of the med is the Shelby County taxpayer. So it'll help the Shelby County taxpayer because we have this large liability in uncompensated care at the med, and much of it will be compensated. We won't have as much uncompensated care from Mississippi and Arkansas because those people, again, will have insurance more likely than they do now. There will be other benefits in that we'll have more community health centers established under this bill in the inner cities, and they will provide care where people, as well as getting the prevention and wellness programs without a deductible, which sometimes stops them from going to get their treatment, their prevention or wellness vaccinations, inoculations, examinations. Since they don't cost, they don't have a deductible, they won't have reticence to do that. They'll be less likely to be sick later on. And by going to community health centers where they'll have the opportunity to get treatments in a more easy way, that also saves, and we're giving relief to physicians, encouraging them to become general practitioners in the inner cities by forgiving some of their medical education debt. Right now, many physicians become specialists, higher paid, go to the burbs, make the money. Want to incentivize them to go into the city, go into positions that might not pay as much, but they can get the benefit of getting medical school education repaid and incentivize them to go, which we need more and more entry-level doctors. So that helps the med too, because in your inner city we've got less doctors. You need more. The more you have, the less sick your population is going to be.
So you think that there is a way to save the med?
Well, this is a long-term project, and it would help. We got in the bill, a baby of mine, so to speak, the newborn bill. Memphis is the infant mortality capital of the world. It's a sad thing. Third world country, 38106. We put in a proposal that will be the largest federal effort ever on research and outreach to prevent and to find out how to prevent infant mortality. That saves money in the long run because if babies are born more likely closer to term, they're less likely to have the extreme expense of a preterm baby, which can cost $100,000 or more, mostly at the med. High expenses, oftentimes uncompensated. So if we can get this bill, we'll not only have more healthy babies and live babies, but less expensive births, and that helps the med and helps Memphis.
Okay, we've got to get to this credit card stuff. a lot of changes have happened, and you're also working on legislation to reform how credit card charges and finance fees and all that kind of stuff works. So can you lay that out for us? Because I know a lot of people use them.
A lot of people use them. There's a lot of debt in this country on credit cards. Just like there was a lot of debt on houses. People got overextended on houses.
We're going to get to that.
Subprime loans. People got credit cards, interest that they probably didn't need or weren't really capable of handling. And it was really ludicrous. I mean, there were times, it's slowed down tremendously now, but I know myself, I used to get 3, 4, 5 requests for credit card applications every week.
You fill a garbage bag
right.
with your credit card request.
And in fact, I moved to my home in 1988, and the previous tenant was a man named Brzezowski. He bought the house in 82. Previous tenants to that was a lady named Elsa Gerber, who died somewhere in the late 70s, and her friend, Miss Glass, who died somewhere in the late 70s. Well, they died like 10 years before I ever bought my house, and for a goodly number of years after I had my house, Miss Glass and Miss Gerber were getting invitations to get credit cards because of their good credit card rating.
Nice.
Yeah, so I mean, these people are dead 10, 12, 15 years, and they're still trying to get them to get credit cards. So we've passed a bill. We had a bill passed a year ago, maybe longer than that, that was not set to go into effect until July of 2010. I found that awful that it was being put off so long, but the credit card companies claimed, oh, we have to adjust our computers. I mean, that's almost laughable that they can't adjust their computers. You can adjust your computers to move a manned space capsule in space and change the orbit and do whatever, but you can't change the credit card rates. Doesn't make sense, but we went along with it. Now we passed a bill. Bill becomes effective immediately. It just really, the public and the Congress had enough of it. And I had a situation, other people have come to my office and expressed the same. Man, this morning came to my office. He was behind just one day in paying his bill. He was then told his interest rate would go up to 22%, something like 16 or 17% over what it had been, and for one payment of just a couple of days. That's, people are being taken advantage of. Credit card companies make just unheard of billions of dollars from late fees and absorbent interest.
I noticed there was something else that, you know, something about the date, like changing the due dates. I mean, that's something, I guess there would be a moving due date, and so then I guess the person would never be able to catch up with it, because... Well,
they tried to limit the due date from the day that you got it. Instead of being 4 weeks, they try to bring it down to lesser time, and when it be available. So we changed that to say you've got to have a certain number of days before the time that the credit card bill is sent out to the time that it's due, and when it's due on a certain day, that you've got at least till Monday. If it's the weekend, you've got till Monday, and if it gets there on the day, then it's good. If it's on that day, it's right. And sometimes I've had the situation, well, it came on Monday, and we don't give you a credit till Tuesday. Well, that's not going to happen anymore. And also, any overdraft fees have to be commensurate with the overdraft. Some people go over on their debit card or on the credit card over the limit by $5 or $10, and they get charged a $35 or $50 or something fee, and that's just not commensurate and appropriate. So the public was fed up with it, Congress people were fed up with it, and the bill did have an amendment by, I think it was Dan Maffei put the amendment in to make it effective immediately, and that was a really good act, and it's passed the House, and I think the Senate passed as well.
Now, you touched on the housing crisis. Where are we on that?
Still a lot of people having trouble underwater. We've encouraged the lending institutions to, on their own, without government interference. We've even had government incentives from the Obama administration, but they haven't been successful in getting to work with the debtors and renegotiate the loans, either lesser interest payments or extending out some time and some forbearance. They just haven't worked with many people. The banks we bailed the banks out with the TARP program, which was necessary, a very difficult vote, but a necessary vote to save the country from really going off a precipice.
Well, some people argue that, too much money is being spent. What do you think?
Well, there's a lot of money being spent, but there's no question that if we hadn't passed the TARP bill, which was a difficult vote because it wasn't popular at the time, it may still not be popular, but this country's economic system and financial system would have collapsed. The banks had frozen lending. They haven't defrosted totally yet, especially to the little guy. But they'd frozen up lending. The economy was coming to a halt. People couldn't get financing for their inventories, for any kind of production, and construction, nothing. So we had to do this. We did it. The banks have not been a good ally. As Barney Frank has said, there's a thing we refer to in war as collateral damage. When you try to kill somebody, the enemy, and you accidentally kill, somebody's a friendly person, that's collateral damage. This was like collateral benefit. You want to benefit the system, but unfortunately you had to benefit some people that don't seem worthy of it, and these people taking these unbelievable bonuses, which have been taken by some of the companies that got the TARP money, has been made it very difficult for the Congress to continue.
Well, is there a way to go in and make sure the money is being dispersed the way that Congress intends?
Well, we've tried to do that, and we've got certain limits on, the Fed has come in, and the Fed's put limits on compensation for banks. And there's been limitations put on compensation for those who receive TARP funds. But it's been somewhat successful, but by not giving cash bonuses, some of the institutions like Goldman Sachs gave stock bonuses, and the stock bonuses have turned out to be worth more than the cash bonuses would have been. So it seems that there may be another way to try to stem it, but it's difficult because stock bonuses are better in that they incentivize the employee to make the company good in the long run and to benefit everybody and not just themselves. But nevertheless, they've benefited so much. There is such a difference in perspective on Wall Street and the financial community on compensation and Main Street. And Main Street's tired of it, and Congress is getting the message.
Okay, tell me about unemployment, the labor market. What do we do?
Well, we're in trouble. We've got 10.2% unemployment nationally. Tennessee's over that 10% level too. We're one of the higher states. The good news is, it's a bad situation. The good news is, because we're over 10 and we're at a certain level, our unemployed will get more unemployment compensation, longer period of time than others.
13 weeks or something extra?
We get 20 weeks, the others I think get 13.
Okay.
So there's more time here than in the other states, but that's something you really wish you didn't have. It's an important issue, and I think that is an issue in the voters' minds, is jobs. And we're doing what we can do to create jobs, and I think we need to do more. In Memphis, we've had so many problems with the government not working. I, as a congressman, vote for priorities in federal legislation and try to get money for specific programs, which I've done for second chance programs, for biodiesel fuel programs, the University of Memphis research, and trying to start up a new economy that way, transportation funding, housing, you name it. But University of Tennessee, I've got a lot of monies for research there to create jobs. But we basically create priorities and then funds, and most of the funding goes through the state or through the city or county government. Most of it's through the city government and or the state government. And that hasn't been really helpful to Memphis. The Work Investment Improvement Network has not been successful. And right now, there's $11 million worth of monies that the city of Memphis theoretically would be owed through the state, which they're not getting paid because they don't have the paperwork to show they did the work.
What? What do you mean?
$11 million
oh my goodness.
that the state has that they can't give to Memphis because Memphis can't get their paperwork together to prove that they did the work that they claim they did.
Where does this,
to get paid for.
Where is this paperwork?
Nobody knows.
Who is responsible for it?
The workforce, the WIN program is run through the city of Memphis mayor, who appoints the board, who hires the director. At one time it was Mr. Garrett, now it's Mr. Russell. Mr. Russell came in under some difficult times. I think Mr. Russell's tried to do a good job.
Oh, okay.
And he's had some difficult times. There was somebody else working with him. It's gone now. Some of the relationships we had with the Summer Youth Jobs Program, where they $5 million worth of funding.
Is there a deadline? Are we missing a deadline right now?
Well, I think we're getting close to it. And I was with some people today on that issue. And it's very frustrating for me when we get monies from Washington that come down here, and because they're not managed properly and they can't do the paperwork, that we lose the money.
Oh my goodness. Okay, let's move to this next. I have 4 pages.
So that's an area where we can create jobs. They can help train people for jobs. And you can have computer programming. There's groups out there like New Horizons. It's a teach people how to use computers, a private group. They work with businesses, they work with the WIN program, and try to train people who've lost their jobs to get good, high-paying jobs, and then they help those people get jobs. They've got a program where they try to get you a job after they train you, and that's a private network, but they often use the WIN dollars to help fund the computer training of these individuals.
We need this $11 million.
Oh yeah, we do.
It.
We sure do.
Okay, I have 4 pages of questions, and I'm still on the first page, so we have to go. Okay, one thing that was interesting to me, you have been working on legislation about sentencing disparities and also racial disparities in the justice system, and of course we know that this population is highly African American. Tell me why you're championing this cause.
Well, there is what we have to is the Justice Integrity Act is the name of the bill that we sponsored, and we had a hearing in the crime subcommittee, of which I'm a member, Bobby Scott chairs, on disparities, racial, ethnic disparities in sentencing. Justice Network Act, Integrity Act got a hearing. We hope to have a markup on the bill and move it along. There's long been a feeling that African Americans, as well as Hispanics, are discriminated against in the criminal justice system. And whether actual or perceived, a pilot program with a study, and our program calls for a study in limited number of jurisdictions, hopefully Memphis would be one, to determine that. And we're trying to do such in conjunction with the Justice Department, having a variety, representative sample of people involved in the system, whether public defenders, prosecutors, probation people, all involved, to look at the numbers, look at the system, and see if there are an inordinate number of arrests. At the hearing we had, we saw an inordinate number of arrests of people of color, particularly in possession of drugs. And there is possession of marijuana, as well as crack and cocaine and other drugs. The man who testified before us from the state of New Hampshire District Attorney's Office, representing the district attorneys, said that they were arresting more people in the African American community for marijuana because the marijuana trade financed other criminal activities that preyed on the African American community. And so African Americans were beneficiaries of more arrests. They benefited from the arrests because they were trying to cut into the marijuana market that benefited the crime market that preyed on the black community.
Okay, I don't know why I lost that.
Well, so did he, and I brought him. I said, well, if you're trying to eliminate the crime that is allegedly funded by the marijuana sales, isn't it smarter to find a way to curtail the sales by maybe decriminalizing the drug than arresting the people who are possessing it? And obviously arresting the people who are possessing it hasn't been successful because we've had a war on drugs for 40 years. You
said decriminalizing marijuana?
Yes.
Okay.
And
just making sure that's what you said.
The man from New Hampshire agreed. He said, if that's the priority, that should happen. He said, you're probably right. But you're not, by arresting African Americans in inordinate numbers, you're not helping the African American community by reducing the crime institutions or crime groups that come in the African American community. They're there because marijuana is illegal. If marijuana was not illegal, if it was decriminalized in some way, then you wouldn't have these crime markets and there would be less crime. The fact is we incarcerate more people in this country than any country probably in the world. And we don't have better crime numbers. It's not working. It's costing us a ton. And we need to find a way to prioritize it. Guys like this fellow over in Arkansas that killed that news anchor, I think he should get the death penalty. Kill a news reporter, he should get a death penalty. Don't you agree?
Well, actually, he did.
He got life sentence.
Life, yeah, life. Yeah, well, not death, yeah, life.
Yeah.
That's right.
So I really think, and you know, when they got the Malvo up in Virginia was executed, that was great.
Yeah, that one kind of hit home a little close, you know, because she went, Ann Presley went to Rhodes College, she interned at Action News 5, I mean, you know, so it was really hard for all of us to hear what had happened. Well,
it was terrible. That man was cold-blooded. And violent criminals and people that commit sexual offenses, especially concerning child sexual offenses, those people are going to repeat their crimes over and over. You got the crazy guy in California with the girl living behind his house and father and children with her. And you got this crazy guy in Cleveland, Ohio with 11 people he's murdered in his house. Those people are going to commit, they're recidivists, and they need to be incarcerated for life, long periods of time, and or have the death penalty if there's proof and they've exhausted their appeals and they've had DNA evidence, etc. But for crimes where there aren't victims, we cannot afford to warehouse so many people, and we do that. And people of color are more likely to be arrested, more likely to be convicted, and more likely to suffer for that. And that's what and if that's not the case, if the facts prove different, we need to try to dispel that myth. But that's what people believe, and that's what the figures I have seen show. And I don't think it's right. So that's why I've offered it, and I think it's something that would be important to improve the criminal justice system, and I think we need to change our sentencing laws in the federal system. Senator Webb has a bill to look at the entire criminal justice sentencing system. I've offered to sponsor that bill for him in the House. I think he might have Bobby Scott or I think Bill Delahunt, who's on the crime subcommittee with me, senior member, former DA, I think is a sponsor. There's our sentencing laws are not effective at deterring crime, and they are too expensive in warehousing people. And what they do and so many times in prison is they learn how to commit crime in a better fashion. They just meet criminals who then foster their lives later on. We don't need that. So that's one thing I'd like to do. I'd like to see something done with justice integrity. I'd like to see something done with letting people have their records expunged for crimes where they don't have victims, so they don't have a scarlet letter.
Yeah, because even when something's dismissed, right? Or I mean, you still see it on people's records. I mean, is that what you're saying?
No. If you're convicted of a crime that's a nonviolent crime, I think at least after a number of years, 3 or 5 years of not having a record, you ought to get your record expunged where you can go and get a job. Too many people don't get jobs because of some crime they may have committed in the past that may not be relevant to the crime, and it may not be a crime that shows an inability or a question of either violence or show fraud, especially if it's a victimless crime. And there are a lot of people in jail for victimless crimes.
Now let's move on here and talk about your voting record. I was checking it out, and I noticed that you voted with Democrats 98.4% of the time. And then the other 1.6% was very unique to me because, there were times when you would vote no when both Democrats and Republicans voted yes, for that vote. And there was also, in that small percentage, there were times when you voted yes with the Republicans. How do you decide how you're going to vote? I mean, is it that you're thinking about this area, or do you just, what's going through your mind when you're voting?
Well, generally, I had a student ask me a question similar to this. Student Memphian, Regina Walker's daughter, who goes to school at Howard University, and she had a project, asked me just 2 days ago.
My alma mater.
Asked me just a couple of days ago. And she said, how do you work it out? You're voting in your own mind, your own philosophy, your district, what you think your district's philosophy is, and what your party's is. I'm fortunate. Most of the time, what my party's in favor of is the same thing that I believe in, which is the same thing my district needs. So that makes most votes a slam dunk, and that's why I'm at the 98% range. When I differ, it's sometimes because of civil liberties, but not too much, because generally the Democrats are for civil liberties. But more often it's an economic decision that affects business in my community. Federal Express is the major economic engine in our city. I'm going to represent the things that make Federal Express continue to be a thriving business.
Yeah, that's a big question for me. And then, if we can get back to, or you can answer this as well, because, yes, Federal Express is the premier company in the area, and I was wondering what you've done to make sure that they do stay here. And we'll get to that in a second, but your voting record first, and then... Okay.
Well, I was one of 4 Democrats that didn't vote for the Transportation Reauthorization Bill.
Okay.
The FAA Reauthorization Bill. And that contains in it a provision that was put in there to take Federal Express out of what's called the Railway Labor Act and put them into the National Labor Relations Act, which is a change in how a union could bring about a unionization of Federal Express's system of FedEx Express. Federal Express has always been under the Railway Labor Act. Courts have ruled they belong under the Railway Labor Act, that their FedEx Express company that delivers the products to the hubs and to the businesses or recipients is a part and parcel, a part of the Federal Express airline industry, and that to lose that to a wildcat labor strike in one particular area, if they had a lot of separate unions or certain other labor provisions under the National Labor Relations Act, could cripple the country's economy. And it used to be the railroads, the Railway Express, now it's Federal Express. That was contained in the bill. FAA reauthorization is a great bill. That's a problem. Federal Express against it. It would hurt Federal Express. It would hurt this economy greatly.
You think they'd move?
I don't know if they'd move because that's a national law, but I think they'd be very upset if they didn't feel they had the support of their congressman.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like if there was another congressman who didn't vote that way.
I doubt they'd move, but I do think it would hurt the business, and that hurts our community. And so I was one of 4 Democrats not to vote for that bill. There have been a few instances with railroad legislation. There's probably one that may come up with the number of axles on a truck and increasing the amount of weight that a truck can carry with an additional axle, not affecting safety, so the record seems to indicate, and not necessarily affecting either the wear and tear on the highway. That'll help international paper. And that's an issue right now where it's most of the Democrats are against it. But I think international paper's here. We're proud of international paper, and I need to support international paper. And it's part of transportation. So when it affects transportation, there are railroad issues where Norfolk Southern, Union Pacific, CSX, all important players, BNSF, important players here, especially Burlington Northern Santa Fe with their intermodal yard. But CSX they all have a large presence here. They employ people, they bring in commerce. Important to support them.
Okay, a few things that just found interesting. Different acts that you've been involved with. This is new. Tell me about the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act.
One of the first bills we passed this year, and we're so happy we passed it. We passed it during the Bush Congress, 110th Congress, the last Bush Congress, last Bush administration, last Congress, Bush was there, and he vetoed it. It was a Supreme Court case. Lilly Ledbetter took a case to the Supreme Court, and what the court held and said that we needed legislation was a way to give women an easier method of being able to bring an action in court and show they'd been, or anybody, not just women, but people to bring and show they've been unfairly discriminated against in the workplace in employment practices. And like if you were
salaries, I thought it had to do with like salary.
Well, it does. And if your salary was less because you're a woman and you didn't find out about it for some time, you were not prohibited from bringing the action because you didn't have knowledge of it and because you accepted that pay for a period of time and a period of time and a period of time. It really didn't, the statute of limitations wouldn't start to toll until you in fact knew about the difference in pay between you and the male employees. And so it gave women more opportunity to go to court in a fair manner to seek redress of grievances for wage discrimination. Very important for women, very important for fairness and justice. The President, of course, signed the bill. It was been vetoed by Bush. It wasn't vetoed. Obama signed it. This year, and President Obama came to us on Saturday, the 7th of November, and talked to our caucus. He said this 111th Congress has passed Lilly Ledbetter, passed hate crimes bills, passed tobacco regulation, putting tobacco under the FDA, passed child health program, child health insurance program, SCHIP, state health improvement insurance program, passed credit card reform, done more for putting monies into research, $10 billion to the National Institute of Health looking at cancer, diabetes, Alzheimer's, heart disease, whatever, more money into transportation funding than any Congress in history. Saved the country from going off an economic precipice. This 111th Congress has been a great, but health care was what was so important, and we need to continue to go forward and move forward and get this done. And great speech by the President, great summation of 111th Congress, made me feel awful. When the President finished his speech, I had a picture I had for him. He's a White Sox fan, so am I. And back in 1990, I had a picture taken of me making a presentation to Minnie Minoso, my childhood favorite, a great White Sox baseball player, and I passed a resolution in the Tennessee Senate recognizing his, I think there were 5 decades in playing professional baseball, and his great career. And I presented him with a certificate as a Tennessee senator at home plate in the old Comiskey Park with the manager of the White Sox, Jeff Torborg, there. In the background is the old Comiskey Park, and the scoreboard says, State Senator Steve Cohen presents Minnie Minoso. So I had a picture of that, and I gave it to the president, and the president loved it because he's a great Comiskey Park fan, and it doesn't exist anymore, the old Comiskey. And he appreciated that. The president and I have a special relationship. We talk about basketball, and we talk about the White Sox, and we talk about health care, and we talk about civil rights, and we talk about Memphis.
Good, you're talking about Memphis. Okay, another act, the Military Readiness Enhancement Act. Tell me about that.
Well, we've got, right now, we're still in Iraq. We're getting out. We're in Afghanistan. And that's a big issue we've got coming up, is what to do in Afghanistan. We have not been prepared, our forces, with the equipment that they need and the rest that our troops need and the training that our troops need to effectively pursue these wars. And this would say that, find us a way to do that. But at the same time, the real big issue is, should we even be there in the first place? I was part of the Out of Iraq caucus.
Right, I noticed all your votes.
And I'm now part of the Out of Afghanistan caucus. John Conyers, who's my chairman of Judiciary Committee and one of my mentors, was very active in the Out of Iraq caucus. He just founded the Out of Afghanistan caucus, and I became a member of it. I just don't see a way to come out of Afghanistan a winner. I've got to say I was affected by Brandon Owen's death, a soldier from Memphis who attended his funeral, and he was killed by Afghanistan soldiers who he was working with as a policeman for the American Army, and working with the Afghanistan troops who we were training, and one of the Afghanistan soldiers, policemen, turned on him and killed him. This has happened with British soldiers too. And there have been other deaths by friendly fire in that arena. And it happens in war, I know that. But it affected me. And I'd been to Afghanistan. It's one of the most corrupt, if not the most corrupt country in the face of the earth, face of the globe. They've been at war for 40 some odd whatever years, fighting each other, civil wars, the Russians over the years.
So why?
They don't have loyalty to us, they don't have loyalty to anybody, they have loyalty to who's paying them. And I don't see America spending its billions and billions and maybe trillions of dollars and giving our blood in an area where I don't see what the purpose is, and I don't see it to be a valiant cause. You know, Don Quixote, marching to hell for a heavenly cause. This is not a heavenly cause. I mean, I don't think we're talking about a pipeline. We're talking about, we do not want Al-Qaeda to have a place that is a safe base of operation, but I think there's other ways to deal with that. And we certainly don't want the nuclear weapons that are in Pakistan to fall in the hands of a Taliban type of regime. And there's a Taliban in Pakistan, a Taliban in Afghanistan, but if they got together and they took over those nuclear weapons, there's a real problem, because if they're also fostering Al-Qaeda, those weapons could be used against us, and that's a serious, serious, serious concern. But I think there are other ways to deal with it, and I think more troops we have, the more likely the Afghanistan people are to not like us and see us as
hostile. And well, tell me, so where is that? What's the status there? Well,
the president's making a decision what he's going to ask Congress for. I voted with the president in the summer to give him a chance. They asked for that, and to give him a chance to come up with his plan and see what he wants to do as a supplemental. He won't do it again. I think the president's reading the mood of the public. I think the president sees it as a mistake. The ambassador in Afghanistan, I think, suggested to the president, unlike General McChrystal wanted 40,000 more troops, etc. Commanders want more troops. They think they can do things with troops. The ambassador, I think, knows better, and he suggested that putting more troops in will be not effective, and it might turn the Afghanistan people the other direction, and there may be better ways to do it. I hope the president doesn't ask us to give him more troops, because I think that while I think he'll get them, he won't have my support, and I think he'll be doing a mistake to the American foreign policy in the long run and the efforts in Afghanistan.
We're on the heels of Veterans Day. We're speaking of these wars. We know that, I mean, we've even lost one of our own. I thought it was interesting that you have a push to honor fallen soldiers. Tell me about that.
Well, we wanted to honor them. We had something called the WISH Act, that we got a study to have the Department of the Army and the Navy, the Air Force, Defense to look at the WISH Act. We had a soldier, we've had about several soldiers from this area die. I think in the two arenas, Iraq and Afghanistan, we might have had as many as, trying to think of I think it's about 11 soldiers die from this area. But regardless, Christopher Fox was a Hamilton High School graduate, and he died in Iraq, and he listed as his wish that his property and his body be just taken care of, disposed of by a lady who was a teacher of his in high school who lived in Knoxville, who was in essence his surrogate mother. His mother had passed, and I don't think his natural father was ever involved in his life, and I'm not sure where his natural father was. He wasn't at the funeral, to the best of my knowledge. I was at the funeral in West Memphis, Arkansas. And yet our laws did not permit that to be done, and Officer, I guess it was Private Fox's body was given to his father's, some family members in Arkansas, and that's not where he wanted to have responsibility for his remains, his funeral, and the benefits that would have been sent. So our bill says the WISH Act is to respect the wishes of the soldier and let them designate who should have that responsibility. Okay, we've got to get to this because we're running out of time. You know, the burning question, you're running for Congress. Former Mayor Willie Harrington has also said that he's going to run. He's said that it's a racial issue. He says that, you know, he's a black man, you're a white man, and that you cannot represent a district that is predominantly black. And you've always said it's not about race. I mean, I've asked you this question many times. You know, as you're moving into the congressional race, how do you face this? You know that this opponent is coming here, you know, and we'll be bringing this to you. How do you face this campaign? Well, I just do what I've always done, and that's to represent my district. Randy Wade's my district director, and I've got a great office down there with Marzie Thomas, my deputy director, Travis Green, Linda Archer, Susan Sowell, Narish, Willie Henry. Got a great team. We do constituent services. We do our actions in Washington. We've got a great team also. And as long as we do our job, and we feel we have, and I think the public feels we have, we're going to get reelected. I've been in public office now since 1976, 31 of the last 33 years, and I've never failed to be reelected to an office. I did fail to get to Congress the first time I ran. I ran for governor and didn't make it. I ran for state representative in 1970 and didn't make it. But I haven't not been reelected, because I've done my job, and I'm doing my job now, and people want the job done, and our constituency is perfect. As I said, my thoughts and my constituency's thoughts and my party's thoughts are together, and that's a perfect situation. I know how to be a congressman. I knew how to be a state senator. That's how I passed the lottery. That's how I passed felon voting rights. That's how I passed monies for the baseball team. So you don't think race will be a factor in this? It was put up as an issue in 2008, and I got 79% to 19% in the primary. I guess it was out there if somebody wanted to consider 2008. But Nikki Tinker, who was running against you, was not Harrington, you know, just different, right? Well, she wasn't. Nikki Tinker was a Delta. She was a female. She was a lawyer. While not having been in public office, she had no negatives to her record, and she had a well-financed campaign. But then there was that commercial that didn't go over too well. But our voting numbers were the same in early voting as they were on election day, And the commercial that she ran that made racial suggestions, which was panned and denounced by Keith Olbermann on...
The worst person in the world. I couldn't believe that. I said, oh my goodness, this is not, am I seeing this? Anyway.
It was Memphis, Tennessee, and that was unfortunate. But yeah, Keith Olbermann and Barack Obama and Harold Ford Jr. and even Emily's List condemned that ad. We got a 79-19 on Election Day. We had a 79-19 on early voting. And when Celinda Lake polled, we had the same basic margin. So the ads didn't make any difference. It was the constituency, and the issue is not race. The issue is, does the majority-minority population, which is African American, they have to have a district where they can make the decision on who represents them. And the African American majority has had that opportunity in 2006 when they elected me in the general and the primary. And in the general in 2006, they elected me on 3-to-1 margin over my second competitor. And in 2008, 4-to-1 in the primary, and then 9-to-1 in the general. So I think that's really been put to rest, and that's an issue that the Washington Post editorialized on September 19, and the New York Times wrote about on September 13, and they said this is garbage bin of, dust bin, garbage bin, or whatever of history. And like President Barack Obama's election by people of independent of race, we need to get beyond race. And Memphis was a harbinger of that election, and it makes Memphis look good on a national level, and as long as we perform. And this year I've got Jesse Jackson's support, John Conyers' support, Alcea Hastings' contribution, John Lewis, as close to an angel as exists in the Congress, his financial support, Lacey Clay's financial support.
Well, let me ask you this. You've also never wanted to comment on, we learned that your opponent, former Mayor Willie Harrington, received a target letter from the federal government on allegations that he used his office for financial gain. I mean, do you have any comment about that?
No, it's in the federal system, and it would be wrong for me to make a comment. I have no knowledge of it, except what I read in the newspaper or hear on television or hear on the radio. And it would be inappropriate for me to make a comment. And I don't know who my opponent's going to be. The filing deadline's not until the spring. And until the filing deadline comes and the withdrawal deadline's passed, you don't know who your opponent's going to be.
Okay, so I guess we're silent on that again. One thing I think that we haven't heard a lot about lately, and as we're closing out, Social Security. I mean, is it here for our seniors? Will it be here for the future generations? Yes,
it will. It's going to be. It might need to be at some point to deal with the debt, which we're getting a larger and larger debt, and we need right now to be investing in our infrastructure, and I think doing a transportation reauthorization bill to create some more jobs. We're going to have more debt, but at some point we have to reduce that debt for our future generations, and there might need to be some independent commissions like there was for the base closings to look at Social Security and maybe to look at Medicaid and see what at any levels there should be need-based changes or service changes, but mostly need-based. And I think there might be a need for that. But for those people who need Social Security, who need Medicaid, it's always going to be there.
I got to ask you, environmental issues, our area has always lagged in this area. What can be done to bring us up to speed? There are some areas that don't have recycling, just different things like that.
Well, some of that has to do with the city government. Of course, the city does sanitation and they have recycling. I'm a recycle bug, but that needs to be done. We do have an opportunity to get into the future alternatives in energy. The BioWorks Foundation is working with biomass. They've a great opportunity for Memphis with all of our agricultural areas around here. The University of Memphis in the program, the $500,000 earmark we announced today in conjunction with Sharp Manufacturing is working on biodiesel fuels from vegetable fats and grease that can be turned into 500,000 gallons of fuel with this mini processing plant that they've got created at the University of Memphis, Dr. Gear and company. There's many refineries, what it is. We're on the cutting edge of that, and solar is being produced panels at Sharp Manufacturing, and that's an area where we can see new job growth, hopefully, and help there. Transportation, we're going to have better fuel standards for our cars. And 32 buses we got through the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act here, at least 20 of them are hybrids. So we're trying to get some fuel economies in our MATA system. And we're looking at light rail out to the airport. The ridership's not good, but the concept is good. And in the long run, hopefully that can work, and that's something we're looking at. And we're looking at high-speed rail to Arkansas. And of course with rail, the Crescent Corridor, which is going to try to have rail transportation take goods off of trucks and put them onto rail, will save a lot in terms of wear and tear on highways, expense of that, burning of fossil fuels.
Where's this being done now?
It's all going to be done from Memphis along North Mississippi and North Alabama into Tennessee and on up the eastern coast.
How long? When will it be
Crescent Corridors, and it's being as we talk. And that's what these intermodal corridors are going to be about in Fayette County with the Norfolk Southern and BNSF, and that's one of the reasons all these railroads come here. 5 Class 1 railroads. They try to get these goods onto rail and off of trucks, and that saves us environmentally and cost-wise, and keeps us less dependent on Middle Eastern oil, which is why we were in Iraq.
And what about, you know, these trains that go right through, like all up parallel to the Poplar Corridor, you know, on Southern? Will they still come through town? Or
well, they probably will. We're hoping that the Norfolk Southern will move its yard out of the inner city, the forced yard right now. Well, you just have to learn to appreciate it. I hear the whistle, and I like it now.
Okay, why?
Because it's kind of a reminiscence of the past.
Right.
Trains are kind of a part of America that I revere. And I used to like the passenger trains, and when I get a chance to go to New York on a train from Washington, it's a pleasure.
Okay, we have 2 minutes. Talk about you know, maybe some hope that we might have in an economy that is struggling, and you know, there has been improvement, but you still feel like it's you know, you want it to move.
Oh, we got a terrible economy there was no regulation during the Bush years, no controls at all. We're starting to work on getting some regulations on the financial industry, particularly the derivatives. Glass-Steagall shouldn't have been repealed. Banks should do what they do best, not get involved in all these other type of investments. I think the TARP and the ARA have saved, according to studies, 1 million jobs, mostly in education, where they otherwise been laid off. We put a lot of money into unemployment compensation, into Medicaid, into food stamps, which is the front line of the people wounded by this great recession. Timely, targeted, and temporary efforts, which are the best ways to attack it. I believe in Krugman and Malthusian type of economics, and that is spending. And I think we're in a better place than we would have been if we wouldn't have. There's no question we couldn't have done nothing. Things are getting better. Things aren't good. They're getting better. And we were given a tough hand, and we're doing the best we can, and we'll continue doing it.
What about a timetable? I know. You know, everyone always
start to get better. And we're out of time.
Okay.
Hey, Kontji, thank you for being with me.
Thanks for having me.
Great to do the Congressional Report. We've been here with Kontji Anthony, Memphis's premier news reporter. I'm Steve Cohen. This has been Congressional Report. Thank you for watching.